Welcome into Mindset. I am Brad Barrett, as always, producer Jared and the lovely Kira. Hey, we're excited for today. We're gonna be talking about where the pension's gone because I actually think it's really important that for a lot of people out there, whether you're new to the job force or been working for years, pensions not that long ago, like 10 years ago and before, were like the golden ticket for retirement. And I want to describe to you a little bit today about what the differences is between a pension and a 401k and other retirement plans, because I think going into this new modern era, this modern age of working life, pensions have gone by the wayside. Most companies do not institute them anymore.
They're disappearing. And like from my perspective, this is like, I like the way you said that, golden ticket. Because I'm like, it's just like, here's your paycheck for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and a lot of times people like that lifetime income. And by the way, stay tuned in this video too, because we're going to talk about, there are still some companies and some areas, sectors, industries that still offer pension plans. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about that as well. I want to spend some time here because actually we nerded out on this a little bit ago, and I'm going to have Kira go through this a little bit because we went through some history of pensions. And we were kind of discussing in this, for those of you who don't know, pensions actually started in the Roman era for Roman soldiers. Did you know that?
No, I did not. That's crazy to think that long ago, they had retirement plans.
They did.
They were better off than you.
Roman soldiers were better off than I currently am.
Subjective, but yes.
In that aspect.
It started there because a lot of times pensions were born from industries that were basically the protectors. It was like the lifeblood of the protection of the society. So they needed to be able to reward them, and to be able to do that was a whole thing. So actually it started there, and then it went into some other stuff. And I thought it was kind of interesting, the history of it. The first thing I want to be clear about here, a pension is a lifetime income. The word annuity started with this idea of pension. The definition of annuity, not the product, so don't go freak out about the product. The definition of annuity is periodic payment. Think Social Security. That's what a pension is. It's a periodic payment once a month for the rest of your life, post working life, so in retirement. Okay, that's a pension. It is funded by what we call a defined benefit plan, which is funded by your employer, which is where this is a key bridge here between why it's no longer around. Long story short, I'll just break this down for you. Employers were tired of taking on the risk. You had these underfunded pensions. They weren't doing a good job investing. Markets were getting disrupted. 2008 was a big part of this, right? When the market, they had a lot of their pension plans invested in certain areas that went kaput and they couldn't scramble back. So they had to scrap the pension plans, right? So there's a part of that. And the risk is borne on the employer in the pension plan. In a 401k plan, for example, the risk is borne by you, the individual, right? So most employers will still have a retirement plan as a 401k option, but very few nowadays, although there are some, we're going to talk about them, still do have a pension. The difference between the two is one is a lump sum number, 401k is, and one is typically a lifetime income, monthly income number.
But as an employee, do I put in 401k, I put into that every month. Does it do a pension you put into it as well?
Good question. Not to go too into the weeds, yes and no. In some areas, like for example, a lot of municipality workers, fire and police, they will typically fund into what's called a funded pension. So yes, they'll put 10, 11% of their paycheck into their pension plan. So it's a funded environment. Some companies back in the day, no, it wasn't. You weren't putting from your paycheck. It was just a accrual amount of how long you worked at the company for. And they would then kind of put money aside for you along the way. It was part of your compensation package.
Yeah, right.
Along the way.
I always thought they were fully just like the employer did it all. You just got that free money.
No.
At retirement.
That's also why the point I bring up that even though your employer may not have a pension plan, you still can create a pension plan. It's just how disciplined you want to be. For example, let's say my example, let's say you're receiving $10,000 a month as an example, okay? And you would have received $12,000 a month, but the $2,000 was actually part of your compensation package that was going to the pension plan. So you really only had 10. That was all your income was going to be, but they had a funded pension plan going on. Okay. Now, take that example. Most companies that aren't having pension plans, compensatory wise, they're basically saying, well, relatively speaking, it's around the same rough value of 12 and 12. You just manually have to take the two and put it aside. Because remember, what's happening here.
Put it aside where? You're not putting in a saving. Do you
well,
put
no,
it
that's
into
the
a
point.
401k?
Yes and no. So 401k be a part of it, but you get maxed out. Right? In
Okay.
a 401k, in a retirement plan, in a 401k, the max contribution limits, you get maxed out. Now on 401ks, which is a good question, that's the difference between a defined benefit plan and a pension plan because you're putting that number I just mentioned into the 401k plan, but it gets maxed out. Like for 2026, the numbers were I think 24,000 for under 50 and another 8,000 for over 50.
This is a stupid question.
Never stupid questions.
No, there are such things as
No,
stupid questions.
go for it. Shoot.
So like
I'll be the judge of that.
genuinely like max out, like you cannot put more than
Correct.
23,000. Okay.
Into the 401k plan for deductibility, for a tax deduction based on ERISA, the Employee
Right.
Retirement Income Securities Act law.
But you still could put more in there and it not be a tax deduction?
No, technically no, you're capped out.
It's like actually like
It
it's
is
shut
actually
down
capped out,
after.
yeah.
You'd have
Like-
to go to an IRA or something.
Correct. And even
Or
then it's a whole
brokerage account?
stipulation. Yeah. But here's the thing. In your employer, like if you have an employer and you're doing your paycheck, like here, for example, if you put in more, at the end of the year, we would either it would stop it automatically, or it would send you a check back for overfunding.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like
So if you have
Taxes.
discretionary income above those limits and you want to put it aside, this is where after tax brokerage accounts come in. This is where having an advisor and doing really good investing outside of it matters.
You're saying I can self-do a pension. Are you just using that word, or is it still considered a pension?
I'm just using that word as
Oh, gotcha.
as a example, right? You can still create for yourself a pool of money that then you can create an income stream off of. You don't need someone else to do it for you. So if you're currently in an employer right now who does not have a pension and you have discretionary income to do it, absolutely sit with your advisor and see how you can create that.
Which would essentially be an IRA.
Yes, 401ks, IRAs, and if you get capped out on those limits, right, and you still have discretionary income, you can then still put inside in just a brokerage account, right? An after-tax brokerage account, and just manage that wisely over time, consistently add to it. Now all of a sudden you have a pool of money. Because a pension plan is run like this. Their job is to be able to say, okay, so we talked about the different types of pensions. I won't go into the weeds, but there's basically two, right? There's funded and unfunded, okay? Funded means the employees are paying into it through their paychecks. Unfunded basically means the employer is putting money aside, this is why it's very rare nowadays, right? They're putting money aside to fund for the lifetime income for their employees in retirement.
All right.
Okay. The idea behind it though is that money that's going in and funded, or the money being put aside, has to be managed. There's a large sum of money there that needs to generate some income, some return. They hire guys like us to go and manage those funds so that they can meet the requirement of what they're paying out. And then they have to map out and plan out, if they work for 30 years, they get 65% typically, or whatever it is, 70%, and if they work 40 years, they get 75%. This is the game of how much you would work long-term to get the amount in pension. The interesting time period to really talk about here was between 2000 and 2010. That's when things started really going haywire, because up until that point, there was still large pension plans in most companies. And what happened was, the first time ever in a 10-year period, there was two major stock market crashes in 2000, 2001, and 2008. So what happened was it just eroded all these funded pension pooled funds, right? So much so that they couldn't meet the requirements of the pension, and therefore they were not, under ERISA law, they were not able to actually have a pension plan anymore because they couldn't fund the actual retirements.
Wow.
That's
It was a
very-
big deal. And a lot of people out there might even be watching this. And in fact, a comment, if you're one, people were hurt by this.
And I know there are protections now, but if you're a corporation, your pension goes belly up.
Mm-hmm.
If I work for ABC Limited Corporation, whatever, they go bankrupt, shutter all their doors, I'm SOL.
There's a lot of case law on this, so I'm not going to speak too in depth to it. But basically, what happened was ERISA, Employment Retirement Income Securities Act, came in 74, right?
Yeah.
Came in 74. Then you had the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corp, which was making sure they were testing pension plans for their solvency. This wasn't happening back then. So nowadays, yes, it's a little more secure,
Okay.
right? But back then, no, it wasn't. But they were meeting their requirements. There wasn't a whole lot going on. It was actually pretty simple math, because they were only paying out 4 or 5% of the corpus of the fund, because that's a typical distribution rate relative to the fund's rate. So they go hire guys like me, we're making 7 or 8. They should be making a spread over time,
Yeah.
right? And then they have reserve for the next year if it was a down market. But then you had come the 2000s, after, the 80s was a big boom, the 90s was kind of like fine, and then the early 2000s was this big rush heading into 08, and it just kind of went belly up.
And the first question we have is, so why don't employers offer these pensions anymore, or the levels they used to had? And hearing it's a lot of risk it's expensive and a lot of risk for the company.
I wrote some down. They're expensive. There was the Revenue Act of 78, which I think was kind of interesting too. Did we research that one?
Yeah. So the Revenue Act of 1978 establishes qualified deferred compensation plans, code section 401k plans,
Yep.
which allows for pre-tax employee contributions such as plans known as elective deferrals.
So what we're basically saying is pre-78, pension plans were really the only retirement plan. Then 78 came around. That's what basically started 401k plans. People think 401k plans have been around since their parents and their grandparents were in the 50s.
Yeah.
It's not true. They only knew pension plans. And I should say something loud and clear. We're going to talk about this later because one of the main industries and areas of this world that still has pension plans are a lot of what the only jobs were 50, 80 years ago. Utilities,
Government,
municipality, fire and police, right?
Yeah.
You had staple, which by the way are some of the main companies, staple companies, oil and gas, Procter and Gamble, General Electric, like
giant corporations,
big corporations that were what we call consumer staples, right? These are the ones kind of generating that. And so pre-78, right, you only had pensions, and once 78 came around, it allowed for employees to put for themselves, and then it kind of thought for employers, they're kind of like, well, let's just do that. I don't have to fund this, take all the risk on anymore because it's expensive, it's risky.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's bad branding if they do defunct on a plan.
Right.
You know what I mean? All the risk is born there.
It makes sense as an employer not to do it.
For sure.
I mean,
yeah.
to be fair.
Kind of. I mean, look, the bottom line here is they became too expensive for companies, and they really just don't want the responsibility. That's the main reasons why. The biggest one is, why don't employers offer pensions anymore, right?
So one of the most shocking incidents for workers losing their retirement benefits occurred in 1963 when Studebaker terminated its employee pension plan, and more than 8,500 auto workers at its automobile plant in South Bend, Indiana, where Jared's from, lost some or all of their promised pension plan benefits.
Yep.
Super sad.
So you started seeing the cracks coming into the 60s and 70s in these pension programs.
And let me tell you something, just a little context with that.
Sure.
South Bend at that time, not a giant city. A lot of people
Worked there.
Yeah. That was a major...
It was them and Notre Dame. Those are like the main employers.
Basically. So like coming from a lot of us out here are not from big cities. We're from small towns.
Yeah.
The Syracuses, the South Bends that have like one or two big factories.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that percentage of workers just out, that's a massive thing for an economy. And coming from, I know that was such a big deal.
Yeah.
It was kind of like beginning of the end for a lot of the industry there.
It was. And that was honestly,
it's devastating.
Yeah. One of the biggest, Studebaker at the time, they weren't just making cars. They were making like tractors. It was a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I think they had a lot of, it was a big plant.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Most people think Studebaker, they think of the car.
I will say this then, from the employer standpoint, if you see something like that going on, you kind of want to be like, well, maybe something else is a little more secure, not putting it in my employer's hands, but taking it in my own hands. Some people want to do that.
Some people want that, but I think it's also that this trust factor was kind of started to erode a little bit, right?
So with all that being said, how many jobs do we have left that offer pensions?
The people want to know.
I want to know.
How many jobs left?
Interesting note.
Give us some good news.
So there's some things we wrote down here that I'm going to bring up here. Okay, so this is interesting on this one, is only 15% of private industry workers had access to a defined benefit plan in March of 2023, the last time this study was written. So basically 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, all right, 15% of private industries had access to a defined benefit plan. That's nothing. That's not a lot at all.
No.
Not a lot at all. And the peak for private employer-sponsored pension plans was in 83, which makes sense because that was kind of the tail end. 74 came around, 78, deferred compensation plans, 401ks got instituted. This was right around the downside here of what was going on. There was approximately 175,000 plans at that point. It's not that way today.
So we're talking less than half, more than half have gone away.
Correct.
People.
Now, interesting to note, there was a time period that we broke down here between 1980 and 2008. Participants in pension plans fell from 38% to 20% of the U.S. workforce. But at the same time, employees covered by a defined contribution plan jumped from 8% to 31%.
So people are still being covered. They're just doing it in a different way now.
Correct.
And may not be getting the full-on companies paying for it all. Which I assume is really the point of like the good stuff, the gold, that golden parachute, if you will. You're company pays for everything is just basically going away and you're taking control and have to pay.
I also love that stat too, not to tout my own industry here, but I do think that advisors are doing their good work here.
Tout away.
Tout away. I will tout away. No, but think about it, right? At that same time, between 1980 and 2008, this is kind of the age of when advisors became somewhat relevant. They're helping with 401k plans, assisting with them, saying, hey, you have this plan, here's how to use it. That's why, that's a large part, I would say, to why that 8 to 31% jump.
The pensions are declining, but also the percentage of money or payment you get is also declining, because you hear all these stories of the teachers union are fighting this because the city wants to, rather than 80% at full payout, now they're getting 60. Like my brother-in-law gets, I want to say 100% when he retires, but like new teachers coming on, he's a teacher.
They have different tiers.
Are getting like 50% when they retire.
It's all structured in what they call MOUs, memorandums, right? Through the city organizations and through unions, basically. And there's so many things to that. But to talk about it, it's basically understanding COLA, cost of living adjustments, and tiers. So a lot of pension plans, like I work very heavily with the Los Angeles City pension plan for fire and police. They have different tiers. Like right now, the current tier is tier 6, but it goes down to tier 1 from years ago. And the difference between tier 1 and tier 6 is vast,
right? For
different reasons. Probably what you're doing it there. So you're going to have people on jobs. Like if you're looking here and you're about to get like a teacher's job, for example, and you're 25 years old and you're talking to a teacher currently who's 60, I can almost guarantee you that teacher's pension is different than yours.
Right.
Something I talk about when I go to fire stations and police stations, there's a lot of guys on the job for 20, 25 years who are talking to guys who have 2 years on about retirement or just in-station conversations. And you have to be careful because it's apples and oranges, because their tier structure and their pension plan is way different than current ones.
So you might be coming out of school as a teacher being like, oh man, I get a pension.
Correct.
But when you look at the fine
it might not
print,
it might not be the pension you think it is from your colleague who's been on the job already for 40 years.
And this is kind of what what I'm surprised about hearing all this stuff is like that pension I thought was like, oh, everyone gets 100% of their paychecks. Well, now it's going to be like, well, you might get 25, 30% when you retire.
Yeah, it's usually not that. It depends on a lot of, it's usually not that low. Like for the one I work with very heavily, if you have 25 years on, it starts at 65%.
Okay.
And at 20 years on, when you become pensionable, you get a certain amount, right? So it's pretty healthy. But again, healthy is a relative term, right? It depends on what structure of your retirement plan that fits into, which again, here's my shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
I'm touting and bragging and shameless plug, but like having an advisor to be able to walk through a retirement plan for you to say, what do you need? And how does your pension work? You hand it to an advisor and they read through the fine print and say, okay, just so you know, if you work X amount of years on your current tier program at your pension, you'll receive X. What? That's not what Margaret's receiving, right? Well, Margaret's been on the job for 40 years and she got, it's a different pension program.
Good for Margaret.
Good for Margaret. Go Marg. But I'm just saying, like, you have to be able to kind of understand it for you, but then say, great, forget that for a second, right? Now we got to work for you, because also, this is also a thing too, it's all relative. Margaret, in my example, her starting salary was probably 5 times less than the current 25-year-old starting salary.
Sure.
Right.
It's all compensatory. It's relative. So I know people want to get down on unions and MOUs and utility companies and all these places changing things, but they're looking at the data and they're kind of saying, well, everything's more expensive. We're paying more people. We're paying people more than we were 40 years ago. Someone's got to give.
Right.
Which is, again, the big thing here is what is replaced pension plans, which is the big question here, right? Is 401k plans. Defined contribution plans have replaced pension plans basically for that reason. And by the way, it's not just 401ks. 457 plans, 403Bs, 401ks.
803 plans.
Nope, not a real thing.
737s.
That's a plane.
Oh, love those.
Nope.
Close.
Nope.
Yeah.
All wrong. All wrong numbers.
Well, we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot.
Have you?
This has been a meeting.
What's the difference between a defined benefit plan and defined contribution plan?
Okay. Well, since you asked.
I didn't know there was a quiz.
Defined contribution would be a 401k. Defined benefit is a pension. I sit here in silence, but I'm retaining things up here.
Producer Jared, who are 457 plans for?
Okay, that's a hard one.
Airline pilots. Pretty sure.
The confidence in which you said that made me want to think it was true.
Yeah, there you go. See that confidence? You say it with confidence. Well,
457.
I will say this. There's been a lot of numbers, but we'll bring it home with, I want to ask for the people that have stuck around faithfully and they want that treat, they want the dessert. Where can one still find a pension job? And I'll say a good one.
So there are really good ones, and I do want to bring that up. So first and foremost, there are 4 major companies I want to bring up that have still very funded pension plans, at least as far as I can see. JP Morgan, ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, and Berkshire Hathaway.
Big.
Very big, large corporations, staple companies that they still have pension. Mind you, though, there could have been a couple others I could have added to that list that don't have pension plans, technically, right?
Yeah,
so it just depends on the company. But career-wise, sectors, industries that still are very known to have pensions. Teachers, we just talked about that, right? Protective services, we mentioned that as well. Police, fire,
First
responders. Government employees, whether it's local, state, federal, they typically have pensions. You got public healthcare systems. They largely have pensions. This is for doctors, public institutions, things like that. Utilities, I mentioned that once or twice.
Like linemen?
You got electrical, gas, water.
Good jobs.
Right? Construction and transportation, for the most part, depending if they're private or government funded, will have pensions. And then the last one I bring up is military. So there are still some really great careers to be built here for pensions, no doubt.
Pensions, great if you have one. If you don't, you're not lost.
You're not lost. You can do it. You can still do it. Sit with an advisor. Build your own retirement plan. There's options. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. We did. As always, thank you for our subscribers. If you're new to our channel, we come out with episodes every week on some fun topics. You can always reach out to us and let us know something you'd like us to talk about. We're happy to hear from you. And as always, until next week, if you lead with love, it's going to be all right. See you guys.
Say welcome to Mindset.
Welcome to Mindset. This is Brad Barrett. We be talking about pensions.
I want to get that mic slightly closer to you. Can you just pull it?
Like this? Or like this?
Like this?
Either way.
But you tell me.
Like an inch. Pull it that way, yeah. Poquito más. Bueno. Is that too close? Now, if you get like that, don't knob slob it.
Oh my gosh.
Ah!